infrastructure financing, it definitely is facing a lot of challenges, especially for infrastructure developers, and especially with the fact of the asset liability mismatch, as well as the sectoral exposure norms. Having said this, financial market as overall basis is taking the risk of the infrastructure project funding, directly or indirectly. When the banks finance infrastructure projects, which are typically assigned a BBB grade, the financial markets do take that risk. The only saving grace is that the bank's credit rating shields the investors from the possible fallout. Having said this, again, a submission is, if we can create a monitoring or a credit institution which can basically, provide the sort of a degree of comfort, not essentially in the form of a bank guarantee, but in some sort of credit assurance to the investors. And at the same time, if many of the provident funds or insurance companies and others, if they are also allowed to invest in infrastructure bonds, independent of, today they have a threshold of, it has to be a minimum of A+, etc. If those thresholds can be reduced with a certain amount of...
That's exactly what I said, that these are critical barriers, credit enhancement and the risk norms, risk floors. And we have to find ways to address this. And I'm looking for solutions. You have just, in a sense, emphasized the problem. So I have no disagreement with you. I think these are two of the critical measures that I laid out. And we as regulators are looking for solutions. How do we most efficiently address this without compromising on the basic principles of these institutions? As I said, it's very easy to say let's reduce the risk flows for insurance, but are we compromising? Are we in danger of compromising credibility, which is a very, very difficult sort of price to pay at an early stage of the development of the insurance sector? So, no easy answers. We need mechanisms. We need practical mechanisms which don't undermine the interests of these players.
Good morning, sir. My question was regarding pricing of corporate bonds. Just like we have the base rate, which was a mechanism which was put in place for loans for banks by RBI. As for me, I think pricing is one, because of the non-transparency associated with pricing in corporate bonds, and sometimes way out of line with the credit risk perceived or otherwise. That also takes away a lot of the investor base potentially from this sector, both on primary and secondary. Some of the deals, there are really no explanations of what sort of pricing goes on. So I was just wondering whether pricing of corporate bonds is also on RBI's agenda, especially with regards to purview of banks, which have increasing non-SLR portfolios.
Well, I think the way we would look at it is that pricing is an outcome of a sort of substantial and balanced pool of participants on both sides. The market has to be thick. You have to have a lot of people who are interested in the security. You have to have a lot of people who are putting it out so that risk comparisons can be made quite effectively. Rating is one input, but perhaps there are other risk measures. And it's only when you get that threshold. That's why I keep emphasizing the point about thresholds, that on all respects, on all dimensions, we need to cross a certain threshold. And for pricing to be efficient, we need to have a certain increase in volume. So if we can push the volumes, if we can push the incentives for people to issue, and we can push the incentives for people to invest, then I think pricing is going to take care of itself. Now, what needs to be done in the intermediate stage, again, we're open to suggestions and inputs. We're in constant dialogue with HIMDA and other representative institutions, and we keep getting these inputs. So, but pricing from the perspective of this framework, this approach, is an outcome of thickness. Efficient pricing is an outcome of thickness, and that's what we are essentially trying to do. Thank you.
Sir,
Maybe we can take one more question from the audience before we go to questions from the media. Yes, sir.
sir, one of the point mentioned in your presentation regarding the FI participation in to be listed kind of a paper. So, what kind of views and checks and balances do you suggest for this kind of?
I don't really have specific details. I think that was a sort of an intention that was expressed, and we clearly are considering it. But I really don't have the. Let me just also, underscore the point that this what's been presented is really the summary of the efforts that a lot of people have put in. And from the Reserve Bank side, we've had inputs from the Economic Policy and Research Group. We've had inputs from the Internal Debt Management. We have Sanjay Hansta, who's going to be in an afternoon panel, who represents the sort of operations side of this. And other SEBI, other regulators have also had people. So I'm really the tip of the iceberg in a sense. They're just presenting the summary, the distillation of collective views. So many of the details I think are sort of either beyond me or I've forgotten. So I apologize, but I don't have the specific answer to this.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to thank CARE for inviting me here. And I'm also thanking on behalf of my panel members. We had an interesting session by Dr. Gokarn in the morning. And I think he summarized everything in his opening remarks. What is required to be done is to develop on some of these points and try to find out whether there are real irritants, problems, and what kind of solutions we need to have. So everybody knows, and he also showed us through various charts what is the status of corporate bond market in India. We've been talking about depth, liquidity in the corporate bond market is extremely important, crucial from many angles. Today, a lot of work is being done by the Indian financial system, that is the banking system, providing long-term funding for infrastructure. And we heard that we're going to spend $1 trillion in the 12th plan. Even if you discount those numbers, it's a substantial amount. And there, apart from that, there's also a need for this depth in the corporate bond markets for manufacturing companies. And globally, this is an extremely vibrant market in many parts of the world. In India, just to make a few points, 92% of the market is dominated by the government securities. Although we have largest number of listed companies on the capital markets, the share of corporate bonds is only 3.3%, so which is minuscule compared to 10% plus in China, 41% in Japan, and you must have seen in that bar chart which he presented, 49% in Korea. So some of the Asian countries also have developed significantly, China, Korea, Malaysia, and there are lessons to be learned from some of these markets for us to take note of.